Yeah, the title of this talk is Ethics, a Missed Opportunity. And I believe it is, actually, because I'm interested in board effectiveness and conduct and leadership. But I think in-house counsel have a big role to play in those three things: effectiveness, conduct, and leadership. The talk came about because the issue is topical. It's very topical, actually. And in addition, this talk came about because I've been in an ethical situation myself a couple of times. Ethics are complex. And I wrote this piece for the Law Society. And I've written a number of pieces for the Law Society. But on this occasion, I did something I shouldn't have done, which is I sent it to 4 or 5 GCs, because I had a kind of feeling in my bones that I was on kind of tricky territory. And the reason that was unethical was because I kind of changed my final draft on the basis of the feedback. Right? One GC, who's a client, was outraged, right? Someone I really like. And she is incredibly ethical, cares enormously about ethics, and felt I was saying that lawyers were unethical, which I wasn't. Another GC, so I changed the piece, and I submitted it. I kind of regretted it afterwards. One GC said to me, your piece has lost its teeth. Yeah. Another GC said, well, you should go to The Guardian and write a big piece, a big read on this. I felt bad. It wasn't the first time I felt bad, because people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, and I won't. But I was asked once to facilitate the Global Leadership Conference of a multinational organization. And I remember on the first day, I was feeling very uncomfortable because nobody cared about leadership. And there was 100 lawyers in the room, and they're all talking about risk. But it was the annual Global Leadership Conference. And I didn't say anything that day. I kind of should have done. And I should have put up my hand and said, well, we should have called this the Global Risk Conference, not the Global Annual Leadership Conference. But I didn't until the next day. And so all of us can get into kind of tricky ethical situations, but ethical situations don't necessarily have to be illegal ones. And so that's meant to be a sleeping giant. And I think you are sleeping giants of business. I mean, the legal function is, in the sense that you've got so much to contribute. Not that you have to own ethics or you have to own compliance, but you can be a big, big part of where business is heading in the 21st century, in my view. And when I raise issues of ethics with clients, one lawyer actually laughed out loud in my face. And I said, how much time do you spend talking about ethics around the fire, around the table, really getting into the subject? And he laughed. And out loud, he said, well, sometimes we talk about reputational risk, right? But we don't talk about ethics, right? I thought, that was really strange. And then I kind of came across this wonderful report, right, called Mapping the Moral Compass, the relationship between in-house lawyers, role, professional orientations, team culture, organizational pressures, ethical infrastructure, and ethical inclination. It kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? And anyway, there it is. And you can download the exec summary and the whole thing, actually. But it's really shocking because it says 400 respondents. And it says 10 to 15% experienced elevated ethical pressure. Yeah. Could you imagine what Dara O'Brien might make of that in a comedy sketch? Fancy a bit of elevated ethical pressure of Monday. It's not funny, really, in some ways, is it? Because you just wonder what elevated ethical pressure might feel like in the room. And 30 to 40% sometimes experience ethical pressure. Close to 50% agreed that actions were sometimes taken against their advice on legally important matters. And 7% never discussed professional ethics issues with colleagues at all. That's 28 of the 400. I mean, what were they doing? But the number that really grabs my attention is 65% were focused on achieving what their organization wants as their main priority. So 65% of respondents said, we're focusing on what the organization wants, not what the lawyers want to tell the organization. I believe, and I know many of you disagree, I think you should be telling the organization what to do, because you're lawyers. That's the report. And it's not as if, this is the first we've heard of this issue, because earlier, about 4 years earlier, in 2012, there was that chilling exchange between Lord Justice Leveson and Alistair Brett in the case where they were investigating the role of ethics in the press. And the role and function of the legal profession was actually really examined. There was a moment where, what is the relationship between the GC and the business? Came into very clear focus, but has it really moved on since then? That was 2012. The other thing is when I say to clients that you're an officer of the court, they roll their eyes. And they say to me, the number of times that I'm in a position to be an officer of the court are kind of few and far between. I get that. And anyway, I also get that you don't want to be blockers. I also get you don't want to be known as cops, right? But, if you saw a policeman outside the door and today they did nothing, just hung around all day. And tomorrow, a guy with a mask and a swag bag rang out and the copper ran after the thief. Well, you mean on the second day he was exercising his warrant, on the first day he wasn't? You're on the wall all the time. And I think you should maybe consider that, not heavy-handedly. But I know that's a very unpopular view. This is a Martian. And if a Martian came down today and asked some questions and said, why, if there's so many great GCs and legal teams, were there so many corporate scandals? I mean, would that be a fair question of the Martian to ask? I mean, would it be fair? Not suggesting that lawyers are unethical or they're doing anything, but would it be fair for them to ask, why have we had so many corporate scandals if we've got so many in-house counsel? What's the answer to that? I mean, the Martian might say, where were you? Is that a fair question? And if you look at the brands, some brands are in trouble and some not. Why are some brands not in trouble? And why are some brands in trouble? I mean, what is the answer to that? I don't know the answer to that. I remember some years ago at the ACC conference, one GC stood up and said, we're lawyers second and business people first. And then that business was in trouble 2 months later. Front page. So was he a lawyer then or was he a business person then? I wonder. So what I hear is we weren't in the room. Yeah, that's a stock answer. We were not in the room. Well, in many cases you were not in the room, but this says that 50% of the time you were ignored. So you must have been in the room, but ignored. I don't understand. Well, why did that happen? And why is it the case that younger lawyers that I meet complain reasonably of being beaten up by the business in the room? And what's happening to them? How are we taking care of them? How are we supporting them? How are we having their backs? This is Richard Moorhead and Paul Gilbert. And Richard and Paul, in their report, identify 4 types of GCs, or in-house counsel. They've got capitulators, coasters, comfortably numb, right? And the champions. Now, where do you sit? Shouldn't it be just one category? Why do we have 4 categories of GCs? I mean, this is not me talking. This is research. There's 400 respondents. Then, of course, we have ourselves to blame because we've trained our lawyers to be right. They want to be right. Their identity is associated with being right. They hate being wrong. We hate them being wrong. And then we put them in this lawyer leadership position, and we don't support them. We don't equip them. We don't take care of them. We don't take care of our lawyers, basically, because they want to feel awesome. Very often they don't feel awesome, right? They want to be heard. They want to make a difference. And we underfund them, and we put them under a huge amount of stress. And then we have the crash, and then suddenly the C word comes into vogue. conduct. Right? Never heard before, really. We didn't have conduct before the crash. Suddenly you've got the Financial Conduct Authority. Conduct is observed behavior over time. That's what it is. Problem is, with the Banking Standards Board report of this year, in 10 years, not a lot has changed, I'm afraid, in the banking sector, if you look at the report. And why is that? Why has not a lot changed in 10 years? And then you say to me, but we are regulated, you know, we've got the SRA. But do you really? Are you really regulated in the way that you want to be? Do you have a context in which your function is supported? Isn't it the case that the SRA code and principles were there for private practice, tweaked a bit for you? But you don't have a body, you don't have anybody speaking for you, you don't have your own context. You're actually away ABSs, but you don't have the value of an ABS. I mean, you're providing legal counsel and service to your businesses, but you don't have the regulatory context to do that, indeed the support or the backing. I'm not talking about another burden of regulation. I'm talking about context that protects you, that supports you. It ain't there. The other thing is stress. Paul Gilbert has written this amazing report on this kind of elephant in the room about stress in in-house counsel. It's massive. Glass ceiling careers, low amount of resources, people just stuck, can't move on. It's a big problem. Stress is a huge problem. And then people of your number, not me, will talk about the flip side of this story, which is that you've had a cozy time. You take the corporate shilling, get your 5 weeks holidays, get your pension, get stuck in to a nice easy time, come in and out of work, you're not in private practice, and yet you've got your umbilical cord to the private practice because you call yourselves in-house counsel. Try telling the finance director that he's an in-house finance director. Why are you called in-house counsel? The reason you're called in-house counsel is because you want some degree of support, because you feel alone. So I think it's time for change. I disagree with what was said earlier. I think it's time for you to tell the business what they need. Just tell them. Start it today and have each other's backs. Rock up to the business and say, you need these things. That's it. That's what the IT people are doing. That's what the marketing people are doing. Indeed, that's even what the HR people are doing. And they often find themselves the Cinderella of the boardroom. You will say to me, but we don't have the dosh. We're not supported financially. But if you say to the business, you need 10 things and it costs $10, and the business says to you, we've only got $7, well, then you say to the business, well, which 3 are you going to drop? And drop them. Just drop them. You say, no, we can't do that. I gave this speech a few years ago at the Law Society, and a lawyer in the room said, I might be needing to impounding a ship in the Mediterranean in the middle of the night. Okay, well, are you being paid to do that? If you're not, don't impound it. Do a deal with your CEO saying, well, we're doing these 7 things really well. You can hold my feet to the fire of those. We're not doing those 3 things. And tell your people that we're not doing them. Then the problem with that, though, is you can't whinge. You can't whinge about resources if you're getting $7 for 7 things. There's a lot happening in this area at the moment. The ACC have written a fantastic paper about corporate culture and about you as influencers. It's absolutely amazing. It's a great paper. I really recommend it. This GC Futures conference is doing a lot of work in this area every year, creating an environment where there's an opportunity to talk and for individual lawyers to grow. I'm still working, hopefully more courageously than I did on those 2 occasions. I've also launched the GC CEO Forum, which is an opportunity for the business and lawyers to get together, 50%, 50% pairs. In this room, it would be really good to have the same number of business people in this room as you on another occasion. There are times when you need to meet alone as lawyers, but there are times when we need to get the people you call the business as if they're over there. They're paying for you here today. Why not have them in the room? Thank you for listening.